The rope burned against Eliza Me Pritchard's wrists as the desert sun carved shadows beneath the wagon wheel. Her cheek pressed against the splintered wood. Blood had dried where Harlan Blackwood's ring had split her lip. The old man stood over her like a judge at gallows. His sons flanked him in a half-circle. Their boots kicked up dust that settled on her torn dress. "You brought shame to this family," Harlan said. His voice carried the weight of final judgment. "Let the buzzards have what's left." The Blackwood men turned their backs. Their horses stamped and snorted as they mounted. Dust clouds rose behind them until the desert swallowed the sound of hooves. Eliza tested the knots. They held tight. The sun climbed higher. 3 days earlier she had been Samuel Blackwood's widow, grieving but protected. The mining accident had taken her husband 6 weeks back. She had worn black and kept quiet and tried to disappear into the corners of the Blackwood house. Then she found Samuel's journal, hidden beneath loose floorboards in their bedroom. Pages filled with his careful handwriting, numbers that didn't match the family ledgers, names of miners who had died under suspicious circumstances, claims that produced gold but showed losses on paper. The Blackwoods were thieves. Samuel had discovered it. The hunting accident wasn't an accident at all. Eliza had read every page by candlelight. Her hands shook as the truth settled in her bones. Samuel had planned to expose them. That's why they killed him. She had tried to be careful, sewing the journal into the lining of her traveling bag, planning her escape for Sunday when the men rode to the neighboring ranch. But Martha Blackwood had sharp eyes and a suspicious nature. "What's in the bag, girl?" Eliza's denials had meant nothing. They tore through her belongings like wolves through a carcass, found the journal, read Samuel's accusations written in his steady hand. The beating came first. Then the trial in the front room with Harlan as judge and his sons as jury. Guilty of theft, guilty of murder, guilty of betraying the family name. The wagon wheel pressed against her shoulder blade. Her tongue felt thick and dry. The rope had rubbed her wrists raw. A shadow fell across her face. Eliza squinted upward. A man stood between her and the sun, tall as a pine tree with shoulders broad enough to block the light. His beard reached halfway down his chest. Dark hair hung past his collar. He wore buckskin pants and a faded blue shirt. A rifle rested in the crook of his arm. His eyes were the color of winter sky. "Ma'am." His voice rumbled low like distant thunder. She tried to speak. Only a croak came out. The man knelt beside her. His knife appeared in his hand, but he didn't cut the ropes. Not yet. He studied her face with the patience of someone who read tracks and weather signs. "Blackwoods do this?" Eliza managed a nod. He looked toward the horizon where the dust had settled. His jaw worked like he was chewing on something bitter. "They left you to die." Another nod. The stranger set his rifle aside. He pulled a canteen from his belt and tipped water between her cracked lips. She drank greedily. Some spilled down her chin. "Name's Cyrus McGraw, bear to most folks." Eliza found her voice. "Eliza Pritchard." Was Blackwood. Bear's eyes darkened at the family name. He studied her again, taking in the bruises and torn dress and the way she held herself despite the ropes. "Marry me," he said. "I'll save you." The words hung in the desert air like heat shimmer. Eliza stared at this mountain of a man who had appeared from nowhere. A stranger offering salvation at the cost of everything she thought she knew about her life. "I don't know you. Don't matter. Blackwoods want you dead. Out here alone, you won't last the night." "Why would you help me?" Something shifted behind his eyes, old pain that he kept buried deep. "Got my reasons." Eliza looked past him toward the empty desert. The sun would set in a few hours. Then the cold would come, and the coyotes, and the slow death that Harlan Blackwood had sentenced her to. This man-bear could be worse than the desert, could be a killer or worse. But the ropes were cutting off the blood to her hands, and her lips were already cracking from thirst. "Yes." Bear cut the ropes with quick, efficient strokes. Blood rushed back into her hands with needle pricks of pain. He helped her sit up against the wagon wheel. "We need to move, they might come back." Eliza struggled to her feet. Her legs shook but held. Bear whistled sharp and high. A horse appeared from behind the rocks, a big bay gelding with intelligent eyes. "Can you ride?" "Yes." Bear swung into the saddle and pulled her up behind him. She wrapped her arms around his waist, felt the solid warmth of him through the cotton shirt. They rode north toward the mountains, away from the Blackwood Ranch and the life that had tried to kill her. The horse's hooves found sure footing on the rocky ground. Eliza pressed her face against Bear's back. She was married to a stranger, running from men who wanted her dead, carrying secrets that could hang them both, but she was alive. Behind them, the wagon wheel stood empty against the desert sky. The ropes lay in the dust like shed snakeskin. The wind began to erase their tracks. They rode until the mountains swallowed the sun. Bear's cabin sat in a grove of pine trees where a creek carved silver lines through the rocks. He helped Eliza down from the horse. Her legs trembled from the long ride. Inside, the cabin held the silence of a man who lived alone. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, shelves lined with supplies and trapping gear. A single bed in the corner with wool blankets folded tight. Bear lit the oil lamp. Yellow light pushed back the shadows. "You can have the bed. I'll take the floor." Eliza clutched the leather satchel against her chest. She hadn't let go of it since they left the desert. Bear noticed but said nothing. "There's beans and hardtack, coffee if you want it," she nodded, sat on the edge of the bed with the satchel in her lap. Her fingers traced the worn leather edges. Bear moved around the kitchen area, quiet and efficient. The coffee pot clinked against the stove. Wood crackled in the fireplace. "What's in the bag?" His voice came soft, but it carried weight. Eliza's grip tightened. "Personal things." "Blackwood seemed mighty interested in your personal things." She looked up at him. His face remained neutral, but his eyes held questions. This man had saved her life, married her to do it, but she didn't know him, didn't know what he might do with Samuel's secrets. Some things are better left buried. Bear poured coffee into 2 tin cups. Steam rose between them. He set one cup on the small table beside the bed. Fair enough. For now, they ate in silence as night settled around the cabin. The beans were plain but hot. The coffee burned away the desert dust in her throat. Outside, an owl called from the pine trees. Bear spread his bedroll near the fireplace. Eliza lay on top of the blankets fully clothed. The satchel never left her hands. Morning came gray and cold. Bear was already up, moving quiet around the cabin. He had bacon frying in the pan and fresh coffee brewing. "We need to move today. They'll track us here eventually." Eliza sat up. Her body ached from the beating and the long ride. The satchel had left red marks on her arms where she'd held it all night. "Where will we go?" "North. Up into the high country where they can't follow with horses." After breakfast, they packed supplies. Bear rolled everything into tight bundles. His movements spoke of years in the wilderness. Every item had its place and purpose. Eliza watched him work. His hands were scarred from old cuts and burns, working hands that knew tools and rope and the weight of necessary things. "You've lived alone up here long enough." "No wife." "Family?" Bear's hands stilled on the pack straps. Something passed across his face. Old pain that he kept locked away. "Had family once, down in the settlements." "What happened?" He finished tying the pack, tested the knots with sharp tugs. "Some stories are better left buried." Her own words thrown back gentle but firm. Eliza felt heat rise in her cheeks. They left the cabin as the sun broke through the pine branches. Bear led the horse while Eliza walked beside him. The trail climbed steep through granite outcroppings and stands of aspen. By midday her feet were blistered inside her town shoes. Bear noticed her limping. He stopped beside a clear stream that tumbled down the mountainside. "Sit. Let me look." Eliza lowered herself onto a fallen log. Bear knelt and helped her remove the worn leather shoes. Her stockings were bloody where the heels had rubbed raw. He tore strips from his spare shirt, soaked them in the cold stream water. His touch stayed gentle as he cleaned the wounds and wrapped her feet. "Better?" "Yes, thank you." Their eyes met across the small distance. Something shifted in the air between them. Not love, not yet, but recognition. Two wounded creatures who had found shelter in each other. We should keep moving. That evening they made camp in a stand of lodgepole pines. Bear built a small fire and caught trout from a beaver pond. The fish cooked over the flames while stars appeared overhead. Eliza watched him work. His movements held the grace of someone at home in wild places. When he smiled at something he saw in the fire, deep lines crinkled around his eyes. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone harder, meaner. Most men who live alone in the mountains have reasons for avoiding people." Bear poked at the fire with a green stick. Sparks rose and died in the darkness. "Maybe I do too. But you're not mean." "How do you know?" Eliza touched the bandages on her feet, remembered the gentle way he had cleaned her wounds, the careful way he helped her from the horse. "Mean men don't waste time being gentle." Bear nodded toward the satchel that sat beside her on the log. "What about you? Most women don't carry secrets worth dying for." The fire popped. A log settled deeper into the coals. Eliza's fingers found the leather strap. "I'm not most women." "No, you're not." They slept on opposite sides of the fire. Eliza dreamed of Samuel's journal, pages covered in his careful handwriting, numbers and names and dates that added up to murder. She woke to find Bear standing guard at the edge of camp, his rifle cradled in his arms, watching the darkness for signs of pursuit. The third day brought them to a high meadow surrounded by peaks. Wildflowers carpeted the grass in purple and yellow. A trading post sat beside a small lake where the trail forked toward different passes. "We need supplies," Bear said. "Coffee and ammunition, maybe news." The trading post squatted low and weathered beside the water. Smoke rose from its stone chimney. A few horses stood tied at the hitching post. Inside, the proprietor looked up from his ledger, a thin man with suspicious eyes and tobacco-stained teeth. "Help you folks. Coffee and cartridges for a Henry rifle." The man gathered the supplies. His eyes kept sliding toward Eliza, taking in her torn dress and the careful way she held the leather satchel. "You folks come up from the south?" "Some. Lot of talk down that way, about a woman who killed her husband. Stole gold from the family." Bear's hand moved toward his rifle. Eliza felt the blood drain from her face. "What kind of talk?" The proprietor pulled out a folded paper, a wanted poster with crude lettering, Eliza's name at the top. A reward amount that made Bear whistle low. "Marshall's looking for this gal, says she's dangerous, armed and desperate." Bear paid for the supplies. His movement stayed calm, but Eliza could see tension in the set of his shoulders. "Much obliged." They walked toward the door. The proprietor's voice followed them outside. "That's a lot of gold for one woman's head." Bear helped Eliza onto the horse. They rode away from the trading post at a steady pace, not hurrying, not running, but putting distance between them and curious eyes. A mile up the trail, Bear reined in beside a grove of aspen trees. The leaves whispered secrets in the wind. "They're spreading lies about you." "I know. The reward money will turn every man in the territory into a bounty hunter." Eliza clutched the satchel tighter. Samuel's journal pressed against her ribs through the leather. "There's something you need to know about me, about why they want me dead." Bear dismounted, helped her down from the horse. His hands lingered on her waist. "Then tell me." But before she could speak, the sound of hoofbeats echoed up the trail behind them. Multiple horses moving fast. Bear grabbed his rifle and pulled Eliza behind the aspen trees. Through the white bark they watched 6 riders approach the trading post. Even at distance, Eliza recognized the lead horse, a black stallion that belonged to Dixon Blackwood. The marshal had found their trail. Dixon Blackwood's voice carried across the meadow water, sharp and demanding. The trading post proprietor's answers came high and nervous. Bear pressed Eliza deeper into the aspen shadows. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The leather satchel felt heavy as a millstone in her arms. "Which way did they go?" "North Trail. Maybe an hour ahead of you." Hoofbeats drummed toward them. Bear led Eliza and the horse deeper into the trees. Pine needles muffled their steps. Behind them, riders thundered past on the main trail. When the sound faded, Bear helped her mount. They rode east along a game trail that followed the ridge line, away from the main pass, into country that would test horses bred for ranch work. "We need to reach the way station at Miller's Creek," Bear said. "Telegraph there, maybe help." The trail wound through granite walls and stunted pines, places where the horse had to pick its way around loose scree and washouts. Eliza clung to Bear's back as the animal found footing on slopes that dropped into empty air. By evening, they reached a shelf of stone overlooking a narrow valley. The way station sat beside a creek that caught the last light. Smoke rose from the chimney. A few horses stood in the corral. "Looks peaceful enough." Bear studied the building through his field glasses, counted horses, watched for movement in the windows. "Could be a trap." "Could be, but we need supplies." "And that telegraph." They rode down as full darkness settled. The station keeper met them at the door, an old man with kind eyes and a limp from some long-ago accident. "Evening, folks. Room for the night, if you have it. Always got room for travelers. Name's Miller. Come in out of the cold." The common room held 3 other travelers, a drummer with sample cases, an old woman traveling to see her sister, a preacher with dust on his black coat. Miller's wife served stew and cornbread, hot coffee that drove the mountain chill from their bones. The other guests made polite conversation about weather and trail conditions. Eliza felt their eyes on her torn dress, the careful way she kept the satchel close, but they asked no questions. After supper, Bear walked outside to check on the horse. Eliza helped Mrs. Miller clear the dishes. The older woman worked with efficient movements that spoke of years feeding travelers. "You folks running from something?" The question came gentle but direct. Eliza's hands stilled on the plates. "What makes you ask?" "Been running this place 20 years. Learned to read people. Your man's got the look of someone watching his back trail." "We've had some trouble," Mrs. Miller nodded. Set the clean plates on the shelf with careful precision. "Trouble has a way of following folks up here, but these mountains keep their own counsel. Don't judge a soul for what they're running toward or away from." That night Eliza lay on the narrow bed in the room they shared. Bear sat by the window watching the darkness. His rifle rested across his knees. "I can't carry this alone anymore." Her voice came soft in the darkness. Bear turned from the window. "Then don't." Eliza sat up, pulled the satchel onto her lap. Her fingers worked the buckles with the reverence of someone handling sacred things. "Samuel didn't die in a hunting accident." The leather opened under her hands. Inside, a journal bound in oiled cloth. Papers folded tight, a few pieces of jewelry that caught the moonlight. "The Blackwoods killed him. I saw it happen." Bear moved closer, sat on the edge of the bed, his presence solid and warm in the cold room. "Tell me." Samuel found discrepancies in the mining records, claims that showed losses but produced gold, miners who died under suspicious circumstances. He wrote it all down. She opened the journal. Pages of Samuel's careful handwriting, numbers and dates and names that painted a picture of systematic theft and murder. He was going to expose them, turn the evidence over to the territorial governor. That's why they took him hunting. Bear studied the pages by moonlight. His finger traced columns of figures, lists of dead men whose claims had been absorbed by the Blackwood holdings. "This is worth killing for. I was gathering herbs by the creek when they came back. Samuel wasn't with them. They said he'd been thrown from his horse, broke his neck. But you didn't believe them. Dixon's shirt was torn. Harlan had blood on his knuckles, and they kept looking at each other, guilty looks." The wind picked up outside. It rattled the window glass and set the shutters creaking. "I waited until dark, slipped out to where they said the accident happened. Found signs of a struggle, Samuel's blood on the rocks, but not from a fall." Bear closed the journal, wrapped it back in the oiled cloth with movements that spoke of respect for the dead. "You took this from the house, from under our bedroom floor. Samuel hid it there, along with papers that prove the Blackwoods have been filing false claims, bribing officials, even selling guns to hostile tribes. They'd hang for this. All of them. That's why they want me dead." Bear stood. walked back to the window, stared out at the darkness that held their pursuers. Why didn't you tell me before? Because I don't know you, don't know what you do with information that valuable. He turned to face her. Something had changed in his expression. Old pain that he'd kept buried was working its way to the surface. You think I'd sell you out for the reward money? Men have done worse for less. Bear sat back down, this time closer. Close enough that she could see the scars on his hands, the way his jaw tightened when he wrestled with difficult truths. I wasn't completely honest either. Eliza felt her stomach tighten. Here it came, the betrayal she'd been expecting. I knew your name when I found you tied to that wagon, knew about the warrant, the reward. But you saved me anyway. I saved you because I know what the Blackwoods are capable of. Because I've been trying to bring them down for 3 years. The confession hung between them, heavy as stone. Eliza pulled the satchel against her chest. Who are you? Deputy Territorial Marshal Cyrus McGraw. Or I was until the Blackwoods destroyed my career. You're a lawman. They framed me for taking bribes, planted evidence in my quarters, had me drummed out of the service. Bear's hands clenched into fists. The knuckles showed white in the moonlight. I knew they were corrupt, was building a case against them, but they moved first, destroyed my reputation, made it impossible for me to work in law enforcement. Eliza felt the world tilt beneath her. This man who had saved her, married her, protected her, had his own reasons for wanting the Blackwoods brought down. So when you found me, when you offered to help, I saw a chance for justice. Maybe revenge too. The honesty cut both ways, sharp enough to draw blood from old wounds. You used me. At first, maybe, but not now. Bear reached for her hand. She pulled away. How do I know what's real? How do I know you won't hand me over when it suits your purpose? Because I just told you the truth, even knowing you might not forgive me for it. Outside, a horse whinnied in the darkness. Then another. Bear was at the window instantly, rifle in his hands. Riders coming, multiple horses. Through the glass they could see torches moving up the valley. 6 points of light strung out along the creek trail. Dixon found our trail. Miller's voice called from the common room, urgent and afraid. Folks need to get up. We got company coming, and they don't sound friendly. Bear grabbed their packs. Eliza clutched the satchel to her chest. Whatever trust they'd been building had cracked under the weight of revealed secrets. But the riders outside didn't care about broken trust or wounded feelings. They cared about the reward money, and they were closing fast. The torches surrounded Miller's Way station. 6 riders in a loose circle. Their horses stamped and blew steam in the cold mountain air. Dixon Blackwood's voice carried across the yard, sharp with authority and the promise of violence. Send out the woman. Nobody else needs to get hurt. Miller stood in his doorway. The old man's hands shook, but his voice held steady. Got no woman here fits your description, Marshal. Don't lie to me, old man. We tracked them here. Bear positioned himself at the window. His rifle barrel rested on the sill. Eliza crouched beside him with the satchel pressed against her chest. The other guests huddled in the corner. The drummer clutched his sample cases. The preacher mumbled prayers under his breath. The old woman rocked in her chair with closed eyes. I could surrender, Eliza whispered. End this before someone gets killed. They'll hang you before sunrise. Maybe that's better than getting innocent people hurt. Bear's finger tightened on the trigger. His jaw worked as he studied the riders through the glass. Nobody dies tonight if I can help it. Dixon spurred his horse closer to the station. The torchlight showed his face, hard and hungry. The face of a man who'd tasted power and wanted more. McGraw, I know you're in there. Come out and we'll make this quick. Bear's hand stilled on the rifle stock. Eliza saw something change in his expression. The careful calculation of a man trained in law enforcement. He called you McGraw, not Bear. Reputation travels fast in small places. They know you're a former deputy. Bear nodded. His eyes never left the window. Changes things, makes this official business instead of a simple manhunt. Outside, Dixon's patience was wearing thin. He gestured to his men. They spread out wider, covering all the windows and the back door. Last chance, McGraw. Send out the woman and we'll consider your part in this a misunderstanding. Bear stood, set his rifle aside. Eliza grabbed his arm. What are you doing? Something I should have done 3 years ago. He walked to the door, opened it wide enough for his voice to carry. The cold air rushed in around him. Dixon Blackwood, by the authority vested in me as a deputy territorial marshal, you're under arrest for murder and conspiracy. Silence stretched across the yard. Then Dixon's laughter, harsh and mocking. You got no authority here, McGraw. Been stripped of your badge, remember. Badge doesn't make the law, evidence does. Bear stepped onto the porch. His hands hung loose at his sides. No weapon visible, but Eliza could see the tension coiled in his shoulders. Got evidence of your family's crimes, mining fraud, bribery, the murder of Samuel Blackwood. You got nothing but the word of a woman who killed her own husband. Got Samuel's journal, his handwriting, records of every illegal claim your family filed, every miner who died suspicious deaths. The horses shifted restlessly. One of Dixon's men whispered something urgent. The marshal's certainty wavered. Even if that's true, you're still outnumbered 6-1. Maybe, but I'm not alone. Bear's voice carried the quiet confidence of a man who'd spent years reading dangerous situations. Your men signed on to collect a bounty, not to cover up murder. Big difference when they learned the truth. He raised his voice, directed it toward the riders who hung back in the shadows. How many of you boys know what really happened to Samuel Blackwood? How many know about the miners who have died on Blackwood claims? Uncertainty rippled through the posse. Horses stepped sideways. Men shifted in their saddles. Don't listen to him, Dixon snapped. He's a disgraced lawman protecting a murderer. Then why don't we let the evidence speak? Eliza appeared in the doorway, the leather satchel in her hands. Her voice carried clear across the yard. Samuel wrote it all down, every crime, every death, your family's guilt in his own handwriting. She opened the satchel, pulled out the journal, held it high enough for the torchlight to catch the pages. This is why you killed him, why you want me dead. Because the truth hangs all of you. Dixon's hand moved toward his gun. Bear stepped between him and Eliza, his movements fluid and sure. Wouldn't do that if I were you. Give me one good reason. Because your men are starting to think. Starting to wonder if they've been chasing the wrong person. Bear was right. The posse had gone quiet, watchful. The easy certainty of a manhunt was cracking under the weight of uncomfortable questions. One rider spurted his horse forward. A young man with honest eyes and calloused hands. Marshal Blackwood, is it true about the miners, about the claims? Of course not. You know me, Jake, worked for my family for years. That's what bothers me. I did work for you. Saw things that didn't add up. Men who went into the mountains and never came back. Dixon's face darkened. The careful mask of authority slipped to show the killer underneath. You calling me a liar? I'm asking questions. Same ones I should have asked years ago. The young man dismounted, walked toward the porch with his hands visible and empty. Ma'am, if you got proof of what you're saying, I'd like to see it. 2 more riders followed him, then a third. Dixon found himself isolated, his authority bleeding away into the mountain darkness. Bear stepped forward. His voice carried the weight of old training and hard-won wisdom. Jake Morrison, isn't it? Worked the Copper Creek claims. Yes, sir. You remember me. Remember when you reported seeing claim jumpers up there, how Marshal Blackwood said it wasn't worth investigating. Jake's face went pale in the torchlight. Understanding dawned sharp and bitter. Those weren't claim jumpers. They were Blackwood men, taking over after the real owners disappeared. Now you're starting to see the pattern. Eliza opened Samuel's journal. Read names and dates in her clear voice. Each entry another nail in the Blackwood coffin. Tom Henderson, Copper Creek. Found dead of apparent snakebite but no snake sign. Claim transferred to Blackwood Holdings 1 week later. The posse members looked at each other, recognition and shame warring in their faces. Bill Santos, Silver Fork, died in a mine collapse that happened after hours. No witnesses. Claim transferred to Blackwood Holdings. Dixon raised his gun, desperation making him sloppy and obvious. Enough! Bear moved faster than seemed possible for such a large man. His hand clamped over Dixon's wrist, twisted until the gun dropped into the dirt. "Marshal Dixon Blackwood, you're under arrest for murder." The fight went out of Dixon all at once. His shoulders sagged, the weight of years of crime finally settling on him. Jake Morrison picked up the dropped gun. The other posse members surrounded their former leader, no longer followers but witnesses to justice. "What do we do now?" Bear looked at Eliza, at the journal that held the proof of so much death and corruption, at the men who were finally ready to hear the truth. "Now we ride to the territorial capital, present this evidence to the governor. Let justice run its course." 6 months later, Eliza stood on the porch of Bear's cabin, the same porch where she'd first felt safe after the desert, where she'd learned to trust again. The trials were over, the Blackwood corruption exposed. Dixon and his surviving family members convicted of murder and fraud. Justice served with the weight of law behind it. Bear wore his deputy's badge again, pinned to his vest with the quiet pride of a man who'd earned his redemption. He rode circuit through the mountain communities, bringing honest law enforcement to places that had been without it for too long. Eliza used Samuel's journal to help other victims of Blackwood crimes. Widows who'd lost their husbands to suspicious accidents, minors who'd been cheated out of legitimate claims. Her testimony had helped put murderers behind bars. The marriage that began with desperation had grown into something deeper, built on shared truth and mutual respect. Two broken people who'd healed each other while fighting for justice. Bear's sister Mercy arrived that afternoon, a young woman with her brother's kind eyes and steady demeanor. She carried wildflowers picked from the high meadows. "Welcome home," Eliza said. The words carried weight beyond their simple meaning. Home wasn't just a place anymore. It was people who chose to stand together, who faced down the darkness and came out stronger. The mountains held their secrets close, but some secrets were worth sharing, worth fighting for, worth building a life around. And that is all to the story for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.